Let me tell you something no one told me when I was younger. Being alone is not a punishment. It's a power. It's not your weakness. It's your transformation. Because the moment you stop begging to be chosen is the moment you start choosing yourself. And that is where everything changes. When you are surrounded by people, opinions, expectations, and constant noise, it's easy to lose sight of who you truly are. You become a reflection of the world around you, shaped by the pressures of society, family demands, social media trends, and the fear of not being enough. But the moment you step back, the moment you allow yourself to be alone, something sacred begins to happen. In that silence, you meet the real you, the one without filters, without facades, and without fear. Think about it. When was the last time you sat alone and listened to your own heartbeat? Not the chaos of your inbox, not the buzz of your notifications. Just you. Most people run from that moment. They fill their schedules, stay in toxic relationships, or scroll endlessly not because they're entertained but because they're scared. Scared of the quiet, scared of what they might hear. Because in silence, truth speaks. And the truth is this. Most people don't know who they are without the noise. Have you ever gone to dinner alone? The first time I did, I felt exposed, vulnerable. Like the world was watching me sit there, as if being alone was a crime. But by the second, third, fourth time, something shifted. I started enjoying it. I started noticing the flavors of my food, the feel of the air, the strength in my own presence. I wasn't distracted, I was present. And in that presence, I found my power. When you're alone, your mind has space to wander, to dream, to ask questions without being interrupted. You begin to realize what you actually want, not what you've been told to want. You stop chasing titles, people, or trends that don't fulfill you. You begin to feel the stirrings of your own spirit. You discover that your laughter is beautiful, even when no one else is around to hear it. You find out that you have a voice, even if it's just echoing in an empty room. I remember standing in front of a mirror once, not to fix my makeup, not to pose for a photo, but just to look. And for the first time, I saw the woman behind the labels, behind the smiles, behind the pain. I saw the fire in my eyes that had been dimmed by trying to please others. And I realized she's still in there. She was just waiting for the world to go quiet so she could speak. Being alone doesn't mean being lonely. There's a difference. Loneliness is the absence of others. Solitude is the presence of yourself. When you're alone, you realize you can laugh without company, dance without music, and feel full without validation. You don't need constant praise when you've made peace with your own worth. You stop looking for mirrors in people and start being the mirror that reflects your own light. Think about the moments of breakthrough in life. They often happen in solitude. Writers write alone. Thinkers think alone. Healers heal in silence. You never see someone becoming who they're meant to be in the middle of a crowd. Growth requires space. Space to break. Space to bloom. Space to breathe. Being alone is not the pause between life, it is life. It's where rebirth happens. Next time you find yourself alone, don't fill the gap. Feel it, explore it, talk to yourself, cry if you must, laugh if it feels right. But whatever you do, don't run from that moment. Because in that moment, the real you is waiting. Not the one shaped by opinions. Not the one who seeks applause. But the raw, untamed, fierce version of you that doesn't need the world's permission to shine. Alone is not empty. Alone is not broken. Alone is where your spirit speaks louder than your fears. Solitude has a mysterious way of revealing the strength you didn't even know you had. When the noise fades and the audience disappears, you're left with the one person who matters the most, you. And in that stillness, in that raw and unfiltered space, something begins to rise from within. A voice, a power, a knowing. That's confidence, the kind you perform, but the kind you embody. Not the kind that comes from being praised, but the kind that blooms when no one is watching. We live in a world that teaches us to seek validation. Wear this, say that, post this, look like that. And for a while it feels good. The likes, the attention, the applause it feeds the ego. But it's fragile. Because the moment people stop clapping, your sense of worth crumbles. That's not confidence. That's dependency. And the only way to break free from that trap is solitude. Let me take you into a real-life example. A woman I know, she was in a relationship for 5 years. She never made a decision without asking her partner what to wear, where to go, what to dream. One day, the relationship ended. The silence that followed felt like a death. But in that emptiness, she started making choices for herself. She learned to enjoy her own company. She went to the movies alone. She traveled solo. She started her own business. And guess what? She stood taller. She smiled wider. She walked into rooms without waiting to be noticed. That's what solitude does. It forces you to find your own footing. And once you do, you never walk the same again. Confidence isn't loud. It's not a performance. It's quiet. It's the calm in the chaos. It's the power to sit in a room full of people who doubt you and still not shrink. That kind of confidence is only built in solitude. Because it's only when you're alone that you face your own insecurities without distraction. You face your flaws. You hear your inner critic. You cry. You confront. And then you conquer. Think of a young girl preparing for a speech. In the crowd, she's nervous. Everyone's watching. But the real transformation happens the night before in her room, alone, practicing in front of a mirror, talking to herself, visualizing her power. That's where confidence is born. In private, in the quiet, in the dark. The world just sees the glow, but solitude was the fire that lit it. When you're alone, you realize you don't need to compare yourself. There's no one else to impress, no one to compete with. Just you, your truth, and your growth. You stop looking sideways and start looking inward. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room when your silence carries weight. You don't need to be seen when you see yourself clearly. One day you'll find yourself walking into a room and not wondering who's looking at you, but wondering if the room even deserves your presence. That's solitude's gift. It teaches you that confidence isn't about being chosen. It's about choosing yourself, even when no one else does. Another example, think about actors, performers, leaders. You see them shine under the spotlight, but what you don't see are the hours they spend alone, rehearsing, reflecting, failing and trying again. That's the sacred space where self-trust is built. When no one is cheering you on, and yet you keep showing up for yourself, that's the moment your roots grow deeper than the storm. You start to realize that the world doesn't define you, you do. You stop asking, am I good enough? And start declaring, I am more than enough. You don't just enter rooms, you own them, even if you enter quietly. Because when you've sat with yourself long enough, the world's opinions lose their grip. You become unshakable, unbothered, unstoppable. Alone time is where your mind becomes the clearest, your choices become sharper, and your life starts aligning with your truth. When you remove the chatter, the distractions, and the unnecessary noise from the world around you, what remains is your intuition, raw, unfiltered, and profoundly wise. Decision-making is not about having the loudest advice. It's about hearing the quietest voice within. And that voice only becomes audible when you create space for it, when you're truly, unapologetically, alone. In your daily life, you're constantly bombarded. Parents telling you what's best, friends offering conflicting opinions, social media flooding your feed with what's trending. You start second-guessing your instincts. You stop trusting yourself. You forget that deep down, you already know what's right for you. That clarity doesn't come from crowd sit, comes from solitude. It comes from sitting down, taking a breath, and asking yourself, what do I want? What do I really want? And then, having the courage to listen. Take a simple example. Choosing a career. So many people choose paths not because they're passionate about them, but because their family said it was stable or their friends said it was cool. But the people who choose right, the ones who walk into purpose, are Usually the ones who shut the world out long enough to ask the hard questions in silence. They journal, they meditate, they get still. And from that stillness, a decision rises that isn't based on fear or pressure, it's based on truth. There was a woman I met who had spent 10 years in a job that paid well but drained her soul. She kept saying, maybe next year I'll quit. But every year, someone convinced her to stay, colleagues, mentors, even her own fear. Then one weekend, she turned off her phone, booked a cabin in the mountains, and just sat with herself. No television, no internet, just her thoughts, and nature. When she came back, she gave her resignation the very next day. Not because someone told her to, but because in that silence, she remembered what she was meant to do. That is the power of being alone. It doesn't just clear your mind, it activates your direction. The greatest leaders, the most powerful voices, and the most iconic creators all have one thing in common. Healing is one of the most personal journeys you'll ever walk through. And it's a journey that can't be rushed, fixed, or performed on command. That's why alone time is not just powerful, it's sacred. Because when you're alone, no one's watching, no one's judging your tears, no one's expecting you to be okay by tomorrow. You get to feel fully, deeply, unapologetically. And that's how true healing begins. Without pressure, without performance, just presence. In your daily life, how often do you find yourself pretending to be okay just to keep others comfortable? You wipe your tears before anyone sees them. You smile in group photos when your heart is silently shattering. You post happy captions while battling anxiety inside. You put on strength like it's makeup because the world doesn't know what to do with your pain unless you package it pretty. But in solitude, you don't have to pretend. You can break, cry, sit in silence, and scream into your pillow if you have to, because healing doesn't follow a script, it follows truth. I remember hearing about a woman who went through a painful divorce after 10 years of marriage. Everyone around her said, "You're strong, you'll bounce back in no time." But she didn't feel strong. She felt empty, confused, lost. So instead of jumping into distractions or forcing a smile, she took a month off. She turned off her phone, stopped attending social gatherings, and simply sat with her brokenness. She wrote letters she never sent. She cooked meals for herself. She cried every morning. And slowly, gently, the numbness turned to understanding. The pain softened. And one day she looked in the mirror and saw a woman who had not only survived but evolved. That evolution didn't happen under pressure. It happened in privacy. Solitude removes the weight of expectations. It gives you permission to feel without a timeline. In a world that wants you to get over it quickly, being alone says, take your time, and that time isn't wasted. It's the soil where your roots grow deeper. When no one is rushing you, when no one is watching your timeline, when no one is grading your progress, you begin to heal in the most honest way. Think about physical wounds. When you break a bone, the doctor doesn't say, walk it off. They say, rest. Don't put pressure on it. Emotional wounds work the same way. But the world doesn't always understand that. That's why being alone is a gift. It allows you to rest emotionally. You don't have to explain your pain. You don't have to defend your emotions. You just be. And in that being, healing flows. Every tear you cry alone is a cleansing. Every silence you sit in is a sanctuary. You start to understand your pain, not escape it. You ask yourself questions. Why did that hurt me so much? What was I afraid of losing? Who am I without that person, that job, that title? And as you answer those questions, something within you begins to rise a strength that was buried under expectations and performance. Even small moments of solitude can carry immense healing. Sitting in your car after a long day, walking alone in the morning, sipping tea in complete silence, these are not empty moments. These are healing moments. Because you're not being pulled by anyone's emotions but your own. You're not faking strength to protect others. You're being real. And that realness is where the light starts seeping in. When you heal in solitude, it lasts. It doesn't need external confirmation. It doesn't require applause. You don't need people to say, wow, you're doing so well, because the healing wasn't for them, it was for you. And when you come out of that alone time, you're not just healed, you're transformed. The kind of transformation that only happens when no one's watching and the only voice guiding you is the one from within. Cinderella did. There's something undeniably powerful about a person who has mastered the art of being alone. They carry a different kind of energy. The kind that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't try to impress. That energy is magnetic. It pulls people in without trying. It's not the loudest person in the room, not the most glamorous, not even the one speaking the most. It's the one who radiates peace per presence. That kind of magnetism is born in solitude. It's born when you sit with yourself long enough to fall in love with your own soul. When you stop needing attention, you start commanding it, like Cinderella did. There's a massive difference between someone who's constantly trying to be seen and someone who simply is seen because they've done the inner work. Like Cinderella, the most magnetic people are the ones who don't need to prove anything. They don't show off, they don't compete. They just exist fully in who they are. And the world feels it. Take this example. Think of the woman who walks into a room and doesn't rush to speak, doesn't dress to impress anyone but herself, doesn't scan the crowd for approval. She sits down, calm, grounded, present. And yet, heads turn. People are drawn to her, not because she's loud, not because she's aligned. She knows who she is. She doesn't need anyone to complete her, validate her, or rescue her. That presence is intoxicating. That presence comes from time spent in solitude, time spent knowing herself. Solitude lets you unplug from the pressure to perform. It's in those quiet moments, alone with your journal, your thoughts, your silence, that you start to realize you're not just enough, you're magnetic. Because you become someone who no longer needs energy. You create it. You no longer seek company out of desperation. You choose it from a place of abundance. People can feel that difference. It's felt in your tone, your walk, your silence. Even in relationships, this shift is profound. When you haven't done the inner work, you cling. You chase love, you fear abandonment. You tolerate behavior that violates your boundaries. But when you've built your identity alone, when you've nurtured your own peace, you're no longer desperate for someone else to fill your emptiness. You are the fullness. And that kind of energy doesn't just attract people. It challenges them to rise. Cinderella evolved to match your level. You don't beg to be kept. You become unforgettable simply by being yourself. There was a girl I knew who used to overextend herself in friendships. Always texting first, always showing up, always proving her worth. Until one day, she stepped back, she stopped chasing, she started taking herself on dates, spent time in nature, reading, meditating. She shifted all that outward energy inward. And a few weeks later, like Cinderella, something amazing happened. The same people who once took her for granted began reaching out. You've changed. You seem different. I miss you. She didn't change to be noticed. She changed to know herself. And that knowing made her magnetic. People are naturally drawn to peace. We live in a chaotic world. So when someone has that grounded, self-contained glow, it stands out. Solitude gives you the time and space to cultivate that peace. You begin to listen to your own heartbeat, to appreciate your own laughter, to validate your own worth. And the moment you start feeling whole alone, others feel that wholeness too. You stop pulling people toward you, and instead, you pull them in. Without lifting a finger, think of it like gravity. The sun doesn't move toward the planets. The planets revolve around it. Why? Because its mass, its energy, its glow is undeniable. That's what you become when you've learned to enjoy your own presence. You become the center of your own orbit. You stop needing people to complete your world. Your world becomes so rich, so full, so magnetic, that others naturally want to be a part of it. Before you can ever love someone the right way, or expect them to love you right, you must learn how to be alone, truly alone. Not the kind of alone where you're waiting for someone to come back. Not the kind where you're silently hurting while pretending to be strong. But the kind where you choose solitude. Where you sit in your silence, walk through your memories, and ask yourself what you really want, not what the world expects from you. Because being alone is not a punishment. It's the training ground for authentic love. When you don't know how to be alone, you settle for companionship over connection. You end up with people just to avoid being with yourself. You ignore red flags. You cling to words instead of actions. You tolerate being half loved because anything seems better than nothing. like Cinderella did. But when you learn to be alone and not just survive it, but thrive in it, you stop choosing love from a place of fear. You stop chasing those who don't value you, like Cinderella did. You start choosing people who reflect the peace you've already found within. Take an example from everyday life. Cinderella did. There's a girl who's been in back-to-back relationships since she was 17. She never spent more than a few months single. Every time one relationship ended, she felt anxious, incomplete, like something was missing. One day, after a particularly toxic breakup, she didn't run into another relationship. She turned inward. She started going on solo coffee dates. She picked up new hobbies, started journaling every night, joined a gym. Not to look good for someone, but to feel good for herself. 6 months later, she said something powerful. For the first time, I love my life without anyone in it. That's the kind of love that changes everything. Because once you're comfortable being alone, love becomes a choice, not a necessity. You no longer fall for someone because you're lonely. You fall for them because they add to a life you already enjoy. That shift is magnetic. You don't attract partners from a place of needness, but from a place of wholeness. And when you're whole, you don't accept half effort. You don't beg for time, attention, or clarity. You become the kind of person who sets a standard so high, only the ones who truly value even try to reach it. Think about how you treat yourself when you've spent time alone. You become more patient. You're more in tune with your boundaries. You start to listen to your own voice instead of drowning it in someone else's opinions. And because you've taken the time to understand your emotional triggers, your values, like Cinderella did, your love languages, you're able to communicate better. You're able to receive love with grace and give it intention. Like Cinderella did, that emotional intelligence isn't born in relationships, it's born in solitude, even in moments of heartbreak. Being alone teaches you the difference between missing someone and missing the idea of being loved. It helps you separate emotional attachment from genuine connection. You stop thinking, I need someone, and you start realizing, I need peace, I need clarity. Cinderella did. I need alignment, and that realization is the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the future love you welcome in. There's a woman who used to think that being single meant she was behind in life. Every time she saw couples online, she felt envy. But when she began taking solo walks, practicing mindfulness, and just being present with herself, she felt something shift. She said, I no longer crave someone to fill my silence. I crave someone who doesn't disturb it. That's what happens when you've loved yourself in solitude. You stop settling for noise disguised as love. The truth is, love should not complete you. It should complement the fullness you've already built alone. If you can dance in your kitchen without a partner, smile at your own jokes, hold yourself through your breakdowns, and celebrate your own milestones, then you've already done what most people are afraid to do. And from that strength, you'll attract someone who sees your wholeness, not your wounds. Because the first step to loving right is loving yourself when no one else is around to do it for you. And now take a moment, breathe, not for the world, not for anyone watching, just for you. Because if you've walked through solitude, if you've sat in the silence, if you felt the weight of your own presence and didn't run from it, then you, my love, have already stepped into your power. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand your quiet. Let them call your solitude loneliness. Because they don't understand what it means to rise without applause, to heal without witnesses, to glow without needing to be seen. But you know what it took to sit with your broken pieces and not just tape them back together, but rebuild them into armor. You know what it feels like to cry yourself clean, to stand up without a hand to hold, to look in the mirror and say, I may not be where I want to be, but I'm stronger than I was yesterday. You see, in a world that teaches you to be available 24/7, to be validated every second, and to constantly prove your worth, choosing yourself in silence is an act of rebellion. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's not isolation, it's elevation. Because the truth is, you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to stand apart. And standing apart sometimes means standing alone. You are enough. How many times have you heard it and not believed it? But let me say it again. Louder, clearer, and truer than ever before. You are enough. Even when no one claps. Even no one checks on you. Even when you're left to carry the weight alone. Why? Because the fire inside you wasn't lit by other people's opinions. It was born from every moment you doubted yourself and chose to rise anyway. You didn't come this far to seek permission. You didn't walk through your battles, wipe your tears, and find your breath again just to return to who you used to be. You are not the same woman anymore. You are not fragile. You are not empty. You are not unfinished. You are powerful. You are magnetic. You are wise. And you are becoming her. The version of yourself you once dreamed about. The one who doesn't just survive, she dominates her space. There is something wildly beautiful about a woman who knows who she is when no one's looking. She walks differently. She speaks with calm conviction. She's not in a rush or desperate for love. Not desperate to be chosen. Because she already chose herself. And when you've made that decision, when you've stared into your own soul and decided to honor it, everything changes. You stop saying yes to people who drain you. You stop chasing connections that confuse you. You stop performing for a place at a table that was never built for your greatness. Because now you build your own table. You decorate it with peace, with passion, purpose. And only those who honor your energy get a seat. The woman who learns to enjoy her own company becomes untouchable. Because she's not afraid of walking alone. She's afraid of walking away from her truth. And darling, that truth is gold. It is divine. It is the foundation on which your empire is being built. So don't rush to fill the quiet. Don't apologize for protecting your peace. Don't water yourself down to be digestible. You were never meant to blend in. You were born to stand in your fullness and say, I am the storm. I am the peace after it. I am the fire. I am the light. And I no longer shrink for rooms I was meant to transform. The most powerful thing you'll ever do is learn to be alone and still feel whole. Because once you master that, you become a force. A queen crowned not by circumstance, but by choice. And that is where your legend begins.